take that long. So I'm going to just going to rotate some of these shapes. So like we worked out in class, right? Keep it very simple. The first thing I would do is we have 3 points, J, H, and Q. Point J is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's -5, -3. Point H is at -3, -5. And point Q is at 0, -1. 180 degrees, so it's 180 degrees. H is going to travel 2 quadrants. 1, 2. Now notice I didn't say clockwise or counterclockwise, because if H went the other way, it travels 1 quadrant, another quadrant, it ends up being there. So when it's 180, it doesn't matter which way you turn, right? Because you end up being. Now, if it's going to travel 2 quadrants over, it's going to be 1, 2. So point H is going to be in quadrant 1. Point J, 1, 2 is also being quadrant 1. And point Q is going to travel from one axis. It's going to travel from this axis to this axis, and then from this axis to this axis. Okay, so and let's start doing it. So let's start with point J. Point J, think about it, -5 and -3, -5, -3. If you switch once, right, it becomes -3, -5, and if you switch again, it becomes -5, -3. So point J, and I'm going to take the signs away, it becomes 5 and 3. Point J is in quadrant 1, and in quadrant 1 everybody's positive, so it's actually +5 and 3. I'm going to take the signs out. H is 3, 5. If you switch once, it becomes 5, 3. If you switch again, it becomes 3, 5 again. So point H, 3, 5, and because it lands in quadrant 1, it just happens that they're all positive. Point Q is 0, -1. It's going to switch to -1, 0. And then it's going to switch to 0, -1. But it's going to be over here, right? So when it lands over here, 0 obviously doesn't have negative or positive, but that -1 becomes +1. So point Q becomes 0, 1, 1. So let's see if I'm correct. Take advantage. This is point Q prime. Sorry, I forgot the primes. Point H is 3, 5. And point J is 5, 3. There you go. Counterclockwise, so we're rotating this way. So we gotta move that triangle. So everybody's gonna travel in that direction. So we have B, S, and I'm gonna do that I, L. Point B is 4 and 5. Point S is 2 and 2. And point L is 5 and 0. Okay, so if it travels 90 degrees, it's going to just travel 1 quadrant over. All right, so point B is going to be here, point S is going to be here, and point L is going to go from here, from the x-axis to the y-axis. Okay, so everybody's going to, not everybody, except for the point that's on the x-axis, everybody else is going to land in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, remember, it's negative, positive. So B, S prime, L prime. So let's get the numbers out. So B prime, so if you think about 4, 5, switch the number once, it becomes 5, 4. But in quadrant 2, the first number is negative, the second number is positive. 2, 2, obviously this is silly, but 2, 2 switch, it's also 2, 2. But in quadrant 2, the first number is negative, the second number is positive. And 5, 0 becomes just 0, 5. Let's rotate this 90-degree counterclockwise, so -5 and 4, it's over here. And that's point B prime. Point S, -2 and 2, right here. And then point L is going to be 0, 5, right here. So after 90-degree rotation, it is over here. Right? Not bad, right? So it's not bad. 90 degrees, clockwise. So we're rotating this direction. So notice that we have 2 points in quadrant 2. So these two guys are going to go from this quadrant to this quadrant. These two guys, M and H, are going to go from quadrant 3 and they're going to be here. Okay? That's okay. So keep the rule. Every 90-degree rotation moves you one quadrant in whatever direction they're telling us. So let's start this. So we have point B, F, H, M. B is -5, 1. F is -1, 3. H is -1, -2. And M is -4, -2. So if I rotate, so let's try B and S first. So B prime and S prime. So B prime, if you take -5 and 1, switch them, becomes 1, -5, right? So it becomes 1 and 5. I'm going to take the signs out. So B lands over here. S. What S? There's no S. It's F. F is going to go from -1, 3 to 3, 1. B and F both land in quadrant 1. And in quadrant 1, everybody's positive, so that's just fine. H prime becomes 2, 1, right? We're going to switch to -1, -2, so they switch positions. Becomes 2, 1. I'm going to write 2, 1. But H here, which is in quadrant 3, will land in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, X is negative, Y is positive. M, same thing. It's -4, -2. If you switch positions, it becomes 2, 4. But it becomes 2, 4 in quadrant 2, and in quadrant 2, first number is negative, second number is positive. So let's point these. Let's plot these. 1 and 5. All right. Yeah. 1 and 5 is here. Sorry, nope. 1 and 5 is here, so that's B prime. F is 3, 1. F prime, I'm sorry. H is -2, 1. -2, positive 1. So here's H. And M is -2, 4. Where's that? An M. Sorry, there should be an M. M prime. So here is that same exact shape. Right? Just rotated 9 degrees. Rotated 180. So rotated 180. All 3 points are in quadrant 3. Guess what? They're going to travel 1, 2 quadrants. So this triangle is going to sort of look like this, but it's going to be in quadrant 1. So all the numbers, all the coordinates are going to be positive, positive. So let's identify. So H, U, F. H is -2, -3. U is -4, -5, and F is -1, -5. So let's rotate this. H prime, U prime, and F prime. Now if they traveling 180 degrees, the -2, -3, it's going to become 3, -3, -2, right? Because you switch once for 90 degrees. And you got to switch again because another 9 degrees, because rotating 180. So all these numbers, they switch twice, they end up being the same exact number. So I'm going to just remove the sign. So -2, 3 is going to become 2, 3. 4, 5 is just 4, 5. And 1, 5. -1, 5 becomes -5. And because they land in quadrant 1, and in quadrant 1, both X and Y coordinates are positive. So here are my points. So 2, 3, H prime. U is 4, 5, right here. 4, 5 over here. And then F is 1, 5. There's your triangle right here. Okay. Five. I'm going to have time to finish this. 90-degree rotation about the origin. So now we're going to plot. So 1 over -2. So let me write that. That is, oops. So the first one, what's happening here? 1, -2 is here, so that's point U. W is 0, 2, 0, up 2. K is 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2 up. And G is 1, 2, 3, and negative 3. So we have this shape like this, right? And we're going to rotate clockwise, so everybody's going to go like that. So U and G are going to land here. That's where U and G, they're going to both go over here. W and K, well, K is going to go here, and W is going to go from this axis to this axis. Okay, so let me get rid of all that. It's confusing. I'll put the points here. So we have the point. So U prime. So let's take a look at U. U is 1, negative 2. It's 9 degrees, so we're going to switch places. It becomes 2 and 1. And U is going to land in quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, both numbers are negative. G. G is also in quadrant 4, and this guy is going to transfer 1 over to quadrant 3. 3, negative 3, so it's just going to be 3 and 3 if you switch those two numbers around. But in quadrant 3, both numbers are negative. W. W prime. W is a 0, 2. And if you switch once, it becomes 2, 0. And then we have K. K, it's at 3, 2. If you switch once, it becomes 2, 3. But K is going to go from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4. In quadrant 4, the second number is positive. So let's see if I did this correctly. U, negative 2, negative 1. G, negative 3, negative 3. W, 2 and 0. W prime, I should say. And K prime, 2, negative 3. So imagine that shape rotated, right? It becomes like that. 6. It's a 180-degree rotation. Let's put the point V is 2, 0, 2. S is 1, 3, 1, 0, 3. And G is 5, 0, 5, 0. So if you want to connect, 180-degree rotation. Let me see if I can connect this better. Right, so everybody travels 2 quadrants or 2 axes. So point S is going to go from here to here to here. So here's where S prime is going to be. Okay? And then V and G, they're both on the x-axis. These 2 points are going to go one axis, and then they're going to go another axis. So V and G are going to be on the other side of the negative side of the x-axis. Okay? So I already plotted the points. Let's start with S prime. So S prime, remember, 180 degrees, 1, 3 becomes 3, 1. Switch once for 9 degrees. You know, switch again, becomes 1, 3 again. So 1, 3, 3, 1, 1, 3. But in quadrant 3, right, this is quadrant 3, both numbers are negative, negative. So negative 1, negative 3 is right here. Point V is 2, 0. Switch it, becomes 0, 2. And then switch it again, becomes 2, 0. But it becomes 2, 0 on this side of the world, on this side of the x-axis. So the first number is negative. So negative 2 and 0. So this was S prime, this is G prime. Point V, sorry, actually that was point V. We're missing point G. Point G was 5, 0. Becomes 0, 5, and becomes 5, 0 again. But because it's on the other side of the world, negative 5 and 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 5 and 0. So that's G prime. Let's plot it. Should be the same shape, same size, same everything, except that its location is in a different area. So I forgot. So point G prime is negative 5 and 0. Point V prime is negative 2 and 0. Now, I'm going to do number 7. I just need some room here. So without graphing, let's do point number 7. So number 7 right here. So z is -1, -5. I need you to imagine where it is. I'll do point by point. Z right now, -1, -5 is here, somewhere here in quadrant. What quadrant? Quadrant 3. It says rotate 180, so rotate 180, Z is going to end up where? It's going to travel 1 quadrant, 2 quadrants. It's going to land in quadrant 1. -1, -5 is going to switch, right? And then switch again. So numbers are going to stay the same. So this is still going to be 1, 5. But 1, 5 in quadrant 1 means that both numbers are positive. So that's what the Z prime looks like. K. K is -1 and 0. So again, you can come over here just for you to imagine where -1 and 0 is. -1 and 0. So it's right here. This is where K is. It's going to travel 180. So it's going to go from here to here and then to here. All right, so it's going to be -1, 0, 0, -1, and then not -1. So let me take the signs out. So -1, 0 becomes 0, -1, and then becomes 1, 0. Take the sign out because it's going to go from here to here and here. And on this side of the x-axis, K prime is +1, 0. C, again, much helpful if you. So C is 1 and 1. 1 and 1 is about here. It's going to travel 180. It's going to travel 90 degrees, 1 quadrant over, another 90 degrees. It's going to land in quadrant 3. So C, which is 1, 1, it's going to become 1, 1. Switch again, becomes 1, 1. So C prime is 1, 1. But because it landed in quadrant 3, this is negative, this is negative. Okay? And then point D, or sorry, point N, point N is 3, -2. So if you want to imagine where it is, 3 to the right, 2. So here's point N. If it's going to travel 180 degrees, it's going to go 1 quadrant, 2 quadrants. So it's going to land in quadrant 2. So if you switch 3 and 2, right, you got 3 and 2, switch 2 and 3, right? And then it's going to switch to 3 and 2 again. Right, you switch twice because it's 180. So it's still 3, 2. So N prime is going to be 3, 2. But because it lands in quadrant 2, the first number is negative. And that's how you would do number 7. Number 8, let me do number 9, because number 9 is a 9-degree. Best that when they give you points, like for example number 9, you just create your own coordinate plane. Here's my x-axis, my y-axis, and just let's look at point S. 1, -4, 1 to the right, and 4 down. So here's point S. Okay. So it says rotation of 9 degrees clockwise, so we're going to go this way. Right? So S is going to go 1 over. It's going to go from this quadrant to this. So S prime. So let's do S prime. So 1, -4. Look at the number 1, -4. If it's a 9-degree rotation, we're going to switch places once. Right? Forget the signs for now. It becomes 4, 1. So S prime is going to be 4, 1. But because S prime is going to land in quadrant 3, both coordinates are negative. W. Where's W? W, 1 and 0, 1 to the right. Well, W is right here. We'll change colors. That's W. W is going to go from this axis, and if you go clockwise, right, so going clockwise, it's going to go from this axis to this axis. So W prime, right, is going to be a new, if the number is 1, 0, if you switch, it becomes 0, 1. But it's not 0, 1, but 0, -1. So W prime is right here. Okay. Actually, let me take this back for a second. So let me just point that W was right here. W prime, it's going to go from that axis to the y-axis over here, so it's going to be 0, -1. What about J? J is at 3, -4, so 3 to the right, -4, so somewhere, J is somewhere around here. And J is in quadrant 4, right? It's going to go clockwise. So it's going to go from this quadrant to this quadrant. So the number is 3, -4. Switch places, becomes 4, 3. Let's not worry about the sign yet, but it becomes 4, 3 in what quadrant? Quadrant 3. So J, it's 4, 3 in quadrant 3, but everybody in quadrant 3 is negative. So those are my 3 new points. Okay. 8, let's do 8. Did I do 8 already? I don't know if I did 8. Right, so I'll do 8 right now. It's a 180-degree rotation. So let's do it one by one. L, 1 to the right, 3 up. So here's what L is. 0.13. 180 degrees means L is going to go 1 quadrant, 2 quadrants. It doesn't matter which way. So if you decided to go counterclockwise, you would go 1 quadrant, 2 quadrant. Notice that either direction you go, it ends up being in the same quadrant. So point L, 1, 3. Point L prime, so look at what happens to 1, 3. You switch it once, because it's 9 degrees, and you switch it again, and it becomes 1, 3 again. But 1, 3 in what quadrant? 1, 3 in quadrant 3. So in quadrant 3, everybody's negative. So it's -1, -3. Z, okay, where's Z? Z is right here. Z at 5 and 5. So 5 to the right and 5 up. So imagine Z over here. So Z prime, if you have 5 and 5, you're going to switch once for 9 degrees. So it's still 5 and 5. And if you switch again, guess what? Still 5 and 5, but 5 and 5 in what quadrant? In quadrant 3. So negative. 4, 2. So 4, 2 is 4 to the right and 2 up. That's point F. So F prime, and again, so 4, 2 becomes 2, 4, and then it becomes 4, 2 because you have to switch your hands twice, right? So it's still 4, 2, but 4, 2 where? In quadrant 3, and everybody's negative. Okay. 10. I'll do one more. It's 180-degree rotation. So point V, where's point V? It's -5, so, sorry, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. -5, 5 to the left, 3 down, so point V is somewhere right here. So V prime, right, so V, 100-degree rotation is going to travel 90 degrees plus another 90. So it's going to land in quadrant 1, and in quadrant 1, everybody's positive. Okay. So now that we know where it's going to land, let's switch the point. So it's 5, -5, -3. Right? We switch, becomes 3 and 5. We switch again, becomes 5 and 3. I'm removing the signs because it's when it lands in quadrant 1, both points are positive. Point A is -3, 3 to the left and 1 up. So here's where point A is. Point A travels 180 degrees. It's going to travel 90, right? 1 quadrant over, and it's going to drop another 90. So it's going to land in quadrant 4. And in quadrant 4, it's positive, negative. So point A, it's -3 and 1. So let's play with the numbers. So put -3, 1. Switch becomes 1 and 3. Forget the signs for now. And then switch again, 3, right? Switch once for 9 degrees. Switch another time for another 9 degrees. So it's still 3, 1, but 3, 1 in quadrant 4. So A prime is 3, 1 in quadrant 4, where the x is positive and the y is negative. Then we finally have G. All right, so let's do G. G, where's G? G is 0 and -3, which is right here. G. So G is going to travel from 2 axes. So 180 would be mean he goes from this axis to here, and then from here he's going to go to there, right? So he's going to be over here. So G is 0, -3, which is, switch your hands, 3, 0. That's 90 degrees. Switch your hands again, 0, 3. But over here, 0, 3, he's going to be up there, so it's going to be 3 positive on the y-axis. So G prime is going to be 0 and 3, 0 and positive 3. Okay? Yeah, that's about it. So if you can do this, you can do those pretty easy. So write a rule for each transformation. Okay, so let's look at here. You can tell which one is the original. The originals don't have a prime, so here, if you look at this, N, Q, E, R, they don't have prime, but these ones, they all have prime. Meaning N prime, R prime, E prime, and Q prime. So you can clearly tell that it went from this guy, and it went that way. So if you describe that, you can say, hey, wasn't that? Well, look at N. N was here in quadrant 2, now it's in quadrant 1. R was in quadrant 2, now it's quadrant 1. Q and E were on the x-axis, and then it just shifted over to the y-axis. So everybody traveled 90 degrees, right? So they traveled one quadrant over. If it's one quadrant over, 90 degrees, which direction? Clockwise. Now, what if you said, no, I don't think they traveled that way. Actually, I think they traveled this way. Change colors. And they traveled this way, which is fine. But then you're going to say, well, they travel. So N traveled 1 quadrant, 2 quadrants, 3 quadrants. So that's 90, 90, 90, right? Which makes it 207 degrees. So N took the long way around. So 90, 90, 270 degrees. What direction? You can say counterclockwise. There's 2 ways of describing them. I just go for the easy one. Okay. This one, what you have to notice is that these pictures are opposites, right? In opposite directions. So notice if I put an arrow here, and if I put an arrow here, notice that they're pointing completely off. So definitely a 180-degree rotation. Okay, so that's how you can always tell. So if it's a 180-degree rotation, that's it, actually. We don't need to talk about clockwise or counter, so it's just a 180-degree rotation. Um, 13. Well, I would go the shortest direction possible. So look at V. V is in quadrant 4. And V prime is in quadrant 2. So V is 1, 2 quadrants over. So that would make it 90 plus 90, 180. Let's just take a look at the other ones. T is in quadrant 1. Where does it end up? It's in quadrant 3. It goes from quadrant 1, and T prime is in quadrant 3. So remember I said every time you travel 90 degrees, you go 1 quadrant over. If you go 2 quadrants, so T goes from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4, and then it goes to quadrant 3. So you travel 2 quadrants over. So each quadrant is 90 degrees, so for a total of 180. So for 13, it's a rotation of 180 degrees. 14, let's look at Y. Y is in quadrant 2. It is now in quadrant 4, Y prime. So Y traveled 1 quadrant and another quadrant. So that's 2 quadrants over. And everything else is going to obviously travel 2 quadrants. Look at H, went from quadrant 2 also to quadrant 1 and then to quadrant 4. This T here went from this axis to this axis and then to this axis. So it also traveled 2 axes over. So everybody traveled 2 quadrants or 2 axes over, which means it's a 180-degree rotation. Okay, you don't have to worry about counter or clockwise. That's it. Okay, that was short.